All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. Got a jam-packed show for you today. We are leading off the top with another season preview from our Power Ranking series with number 5, the Dallas Mavericks. So we're going to do a season preview on the Dallas Mavericks. After that, there was one preseason game last night that played the majority of the starters from both teams. That was the New Orleans Pelicans versus the Orlando Magic. So we're going to do a breakdown of that game from the perspective of both teams. And then at the tail end of the show, I've got 5 clips for another episode of Timpf's tape that we're going to hit at the tail end of the show. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments. We are going to get in the habit of doing probably 1 or 2 mailbags a week during the regular season. So keep dropping those questions in the comments and we will be getting to them throughout the regular season. All right, let's talk some basketball. So number 5, this is the last team in my if things go right tier. I have 4 teams in the top tier of championship contenders. These are teams that I think have way less in the way of like holes in terms of like talent deficiencies in specific areas of the roster that could make them very beatable, right? So for instance, like one of the things we're going to talk about with the Dallas Mavericks today is like they have a substantial hole in their starting lineup in terms of perimeter speed, right? You've got Klay Thompson, who's a very old guard. You've got Luka Doncic, who obviously is a big body point guard who doesn't cover a ton of ground. And you've got Kyrie Irving and PJ Washington. So like perimeter speed is a substantial weakness of that particular team. As you go to the teams that are higher up on this tier, they have more strengths, a little bit less in the way of weaknesses, fewer ways that you could conceive of them getting knocked out at various points over the course of 4 playoff rounds. So among this tier, though, from teams 11 to 5, I do think Dallas is the best of the if things go right teams. And we're going to talk about all the reasons why today. So offseason recap real quick. They lost Josh Green, Tim Hardaway Jr., Derek Jones, Alex Fudge, and Greg Brown. They added Spencer Dinwiddie, who was with the Lakers last year, Kessler Edwards, who was with the Kings last year, Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall, and Klay Thompson. Before we get into some of the specifics with the Mavs for this year, let's go really quickly over their free agent addition. So Spencer Dinwiddie, I covered him very closely with the Lakers. Mavericks fans will obviously know him from a few years ago when he was on the team during the Western Conference Finals run. Not as good offensively as he used to be. He just hasn't shot the ball well from the perimeter since leaving Dallas. He's been below a point per jump shot in both seasons since leaving Dallas, particularly bad when he was in Brooklyn. The last time he shot the ball well, though, was in Dallas. And it was a very different role. In Brooklyn, he was like a primary shot creator for that team. With the Lakers, they were running a 5-out offense, usually with 3 ball handlers on the floor. So it was a lot more read and react and kind of flowing from side to side. Lots of ball and player movement, right? In Dallas, he's going to go back to what he did in 2022, which is run some spread pick and roll in their kind of 4-out, 1-in attack, and then spotting up off the ball. And he played really well in that role last time. I think for the most part, how well he does in that role this time will come down to, as we've talked about, how well he shoots the basketball. So we'll just see how quickly he slides back into that comfortable feeling he had when he was with Dallas last time. I will say, when he was with the Lakers, I was impressed with him defensively. He's good. He's a good athlete. He's got long arms. He competes, can guard the best perimeter player on the other team reasonably well. I think that's a legitimate weapon to add to this team off the bench. I think he's a great pickup at a veteran minimum contract. I actually wish the Lakers would have kept him. I'm not sure exactly why they just let him walk like the way that they did. But maybe he just liked the role that he could potentially have in Dallas better. So Kessler Edwards is an athletic guard defender. He was a fringe rotation guy for the Kings last year. Didn't play much. Did have his best 3-point shooting season last year, though. Quentin Grimes, I want you guys to think of him as like a discounted, lesser version of Dante DiVincenzo. Like, he's an aggressive shooter with a quick release, jumps a little higher on his shot than Dante does. But he's a really good athlete. He competes on defense. He's not as good as Dante, but he's kind of that archetype of off-ball guard. I think he's perfectly fine as a back end of the rotation type of guard. And then Najee Marshall is one of my favorite bench guards in the league. About a half dozen times a year as I'm watching random Pelicans games, I'll be like, holy shit, that was a crazy move from Najee Marshall. It just is crazy to me. Like for a bench guard, just like the the creativity and the deep bag of dribble combinations that Najee can get to. He's got some legit off the dribble pop. He also just had the best three-point shooting season of his career. He shot 39% last year, and he's got good size. He's big and strong as a perimeter defender. I love him as a guard off the bench for the Mavs. And then let's talk about the Klay Thompson fit. So Klay Thompson was a move for the Mavs to go all in on offense. Last year, the Mavs core lineups all had 3 iffy above the break 3-point shooters on the floor. So like obviously the center position, Derrick Jones Jr. shot 26% on above the break threes in the playoffs, and PJ Washington shot 31% on above the break threes in the playoffs. So even though PJ and Derrick Jones were both pretty solid from the corners, it was their above the break 3-point shot and that kind of like weakness in their games that became an issue. Specifically, once Luka started having to use them as screeners. I want you guys to imagine a spread floor in a 4-out, 1-in situation. And I want you to imagine PJ Washington in one corner, Derrick Jones in the other corner. Let's pretend Luka's on the right wing running the action and Kyrie's on the opposite wing. Kyrie, obviously, is a great above the break 3-point shooter. Someone comes up to set the ball screen. Let's call it Derek Lively. And Luka and Derek get to kind of work downhill into the lane. And as long as the team is guarding it 2-on-2, Luka is obviously going to either shoot his little patented something in the short to mid-range, or he's going to throw a lob to the big man if the screen defender commits, right? And then if anybody helps from the weak side, so if the two guys in the ball screen kind of coalesce around Luka and the low man, and let's say PJ Washington's in the left corner, that low man comes over, the guy guarding PJ to tag Derek Lively. That's where Luka throws the skip pass to the weak side corner, and he's going to knock down that corner three. Both Derrick Jones and PJ Washington shot well on corner threes last year. PJ Washington shot lights out on corner threes in the playoff run, right? So like that was kind of how it worked naturally for Dallas in the majority of their matchups. Then they run into Boston, and Boston takes Kristaps Porzingis, and instead of putting him on Derek Lively and running a drop coverage, they put Jason Tatum on the center for Dallas, and they put Kristaps Porzingis on PJ Washington or on Derrick Jones, right? The guys that are the weaker above the break shooters. So now imagine that same configuration, right? I've got PJ Washington in the left corner, got Derrick Jones on the right corner, I've got Kyrie on the opposite wing. Here comes Derek Lively to set a pick. Now they're just switching it. And now I have Jason Tatum on me. And Luka did have stretches where he scored the ball well against switches against Boston. We all know that he filled the box score up, right? But Dallas's offense overall, on a large scale of the over the course of the series, their offense completely fell apart. The specific reason why was Luka was basically only able to work effectively in ISO. So let's say now we know we call Porzingis up into the screen, or we call Derek Lively up into the screen. They're just switching it. Jaylen Brown runs down with the center. Tatum stays on Luka. Luka wants to get into a traditional pick and roll coverage so that he can pick them apart with the pass, right? So now he calls, let's say that PJ Washington is being guarded by Kristaps Porzingis. PJ Washington was all the way in the left corner. So now PJ Washington's going to come up to set the screen. Kyrie is going to slide down to the corner. Derek Lively, though, in this case, because he's not a floor spacer, neither was Daniel Gafford, that guy's standing in the dunker spot now. So now, as a result of that guy standing in the dunker spot, Jason Tatum is sitting head directly underneath the rim in help, ready for anything that comes towards the rim. It's just really congested down there now. When Derek Lively was setting the screen, him and Luka in a vacant paint, him and Luka were rolling together, driving and rolling into the paint together. But now, since he has to call PJ into the screen, Derek's just sitting there in the paint, which allows Tatum to be in help. Then from there, as Luka comes off the screen, Porzingis is there to corral him coming off, and Jaylen Brown is chasing over the top. And PJ Washington's only spot he can go to, because Kyrie's in the left corner and Derrick Jones is in the right corner, or if Derrick Jones and PJ are switched, then it's PJ in the corner, whoever it is. There's somebody in the corner, but there's the only opening for PJ to go is above the break. Because if he rolls, now there's a shit ton of congestion in there because Derek's already in there with Tatum on him. Luka's driving in there. And like literally Porzingis, the guy who's guarding him, is sitting in a drop coverage guarding Luka coming downhill, or Horford guarding downhill, right? Although Horford did some switching in the series as well. But PJ Washington would then pop above the break because that's the only opening that he can go to. and he's not a good above the break shooter. And so that was kind of where things fell apart for Dallas. The pick and roll attack, which was predicated on picking on the opponent's center in mistakes that he might make, was shut down by Boston's ability to put their center onto a weaker above the break shooter. And so here's the thing, just simply by, we all know that Derrick Jones Jr. is a much better defensive player than Klay. That goes without saying. But Klay is the second best shooter in the history of the sport. So, and one other thing I'll say about this, PJ Washington has good form on his jump shot. The elbow's in, he's in a line, gets good lift, it's fluid, there's not a hitch, there's not a lot of wasted motion. And he did shoot 37% on above the break threes for Dallas in the regular season. So the upside for this move is you're taking Derrick Jones Jr., who is a guy who is a weak above the break shooter, out of the equation, and you're plugging in Klay Thompson, who's one of the best at it in the history of the league, right? But also the weak point is still there with PJ Washington. Imagine if you face Boston again with this exact same lineup. All that's happening is instead of them being able to help off of Derrick Jones Jr. too in a lot of these cases, they're just still going to be helping off of PJ Washington. They're just going to be glued up to Klay Thompson off the ball. So let's say it's Drew Holiday on Klay. He's going to be glued up on Klay, you're right. But they're still going to put Porzingis on PJ Washington. They're still going to put Tatum on Derek Lively. They're still going to put Jaylen Brown on Luka Doncic. They're still going to switch those ball screens, and they're not just going to suddenly roam off of Klay. They're going to continue to roam off of PJ with the rim protector. So obviously Klay increases the aggregate shooting talent that's on the floor. But schematically, in order for this to all work, PJ Washington inevitably is going to have to be able to hit above the break threes for the specific matchup of Boston. Now, as we talk about this, like, here's the thing. The West is kind of wide open. I have Denver and Oklahoma City above Dallas. We're going to talk about why in a little bit. I want to make sure I give my explanation like I always do when I make these sorts of decisions. I want to explain why. But the East, like, yeah, the Knicks have a shot. Yeah, the Sixers have a shot. Yeah, the Bucks have a shot. But Boston, I think the gap between Boston and the rest of the East is larger than the gap between, let's say, Oklahoma City or Denver in the rest of the Western Conference, right? And so, like, with that being the case, the inevitable kind of like barrier standing between Dallas and the NBA championship is Boston. And in order to beat Boston, PJ Washington is going to have to hit above the break threes. So, like, even though I think Klay is a massive influx of offensive talent, he's going to make them so much better offensively over the course of the season. I think Dallas is going to be a top 3 offense this year. We're going to continue to talk about all those reasons why. But the reality is the ultimate goal, their goal of beating Boston if they were going to get out of the West and win the NBA championship, I do think PJ Washington eventually is going to have to hit above the break threes at a certain rate. And it's a copycat league too. Like any team that has 2 forwards now that they feel realistically could guard Luka, at least make Luka work. They're just gonna even just one, because Gafford and Lively are not like back to the basket, like beat switches types of centers. They're gonna put the guy that they think can guard Luka on Luka, right? And then they're gonna put their bigger forward on the center. In this case, Lively or Gafford, right? They're going to switch it, and then they're going to leave their center on PJ Washington. Teams are going to copy that. Like, it was statistically devastating what it did to Dallas's offense. Any coaching staff worth their salt is going to continue to explore that concept as a way to guard Dallas. So with that being the case, PJ Washington's offensive development, particularly as an above-the-break shooter, and I think there's some upside there. Like I said, his form looks good. He did shoot pretty well there in the regular season. PJ Washington's growth as an above-the-break shooter is going to be a key thing to keep an eye on for Dallas this season. And one of the things I hope they do is don't just only plug PJ in the corner and make sure that he gets plenty of above-the-break attempts over the course of the season to help kind of polish that up and make sure that he's comfortable by the time you get to the postseason. Will the Mavs run more action? Klay Thompson hit 163 shots coming off of off-ball screens last year. It was most in the league by far. It's 84 more than any non-Warrior in the entire NBA last year. He also got 1.1 points per shot in those situations. In half-court settings, 1.1 points per shot is very efficient. Offensive ratings tend to get closer to 120 for the best, or a little above 120 for the best offenses in the league. But offensive ratings are inflated by things like offensive rebounds and transition scoring, right? Because transition offensive ratings are typically way higher. 1.1 points per shot in the half court is a really good shot. Can't hope to do much better than a 110 offensive rating in the half court. Here's the thing, too. Najee Marshall can dribble, shoot, and pass. Spencer Dinwiddie can dribble, shoot, and pass. Kyrie Irving can dribble, shoot, and pass. Derek Lively at the center position is, like, in my opinion, one of the better, like, 5-out prospects that we have in the league at the center position because he's so good at making reads and making passes out of overplay situations. This is a different roster than Dallas had last year. It's a lot more ball handling, a lot more guys who are capable of doing more than just shooting catch and shoot threes on offense. So I'm really curious to see if Jason Kidd implements more ball and player movement this year. And there's a very specific reason why I believe in that. Those of you guys who watched Timpf's tape yesterday will know what I'm talking about. When you have more on-ball action and off-ball player movement and screening, it makes it so that the defense has to make more decisions, right? And the more decisions that the defense has to make on any given possession, the more possibility for them to make a mistake. And a mistake almost always ends in a open shot or a layup, right? So this is where, like, am I asking the Mavs to ditch Luka-Ball? No. That absolutely should be their main pitch. But Luka-Ball, the spread pick and roll, 4-out, 1-in concept, that relies entirely on Luka's superpower. The way the defense doesn't make mistakes against Luka-Ball. It decides what they want to do. Make Luka a scorer or make him a passer, right? But when you have more off-ball action and player movement and on-ball action to start possessions, that's where you can start getting more defensive mistakes where guys just fuck up and someone ends up wide open. And so my thing is, like, I want to see them build that out as a pitch. If Luka-Ball is going to be the fastball, I want to see this as a changeup. I want to see them build it out over the course of the season. And no, by the way, when I say 5-out concepts, this doesn't mean just plug Maxi Kleber in at center. That's not what 5-out is. That's just a stretch 5. 5-out is about multiple actions on the same possession. We're getting side to side. We are involving multiple ball handlers. There is a flow. It is a blender, both on and off the ball. That is 5-out. I would like to see Dallas build that out as their changeup this year, so that if they run into a matchup where it's like, hey, they just tucked the center on PJ Washington, he's just missed 2 or 3 consecutive above the break threes. He looks a little sketched out by it. Luka's now having to attack big forwards and switches. Our offense is grinding down a little. Hey, why don't we plug in an extra ball handler? Like, why don't we throw in, we'll go, Luka, Kyrie, and hell, like, let's just say with Klay on the floor, even with just those 3, and let's just kind of tweak the way we play and get a little bit more side to side, have a little bit more action being run, and see if we can't just loosen things up a little bit for a few minutes. My prediction is that they won't do that. My prediction is that they'll more or less do exactly what they did last year, but then add like 4 to 5 possessions a game where they run Klay Thompson off of some sort of like double wide stagger or floppy action underneath the basket, something like that, where they try to get Klay some catch and shoot threes, just kind of randomly mixed in, surrounded by typical Luka-Ball. But I'm hoping that they add more of a 5-out look over the course of this season. Either way, I expect the Mavs to be a top 3 offense this year. The Luka and Kyrie fit is perfect. Klay is a massive upgrade of Derrick Jones Jr. on offense. I think PJ Washington will continue to improve this year. They have an existing offensive framework that works really well. Even the issues I talked about are more matchup specific. Like, here's the thing: not every team has Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown at the guard or at the forward positions, right? Like, I was like kind of going through the league and looking at it, and there are teams, and they're all the good teams, right? Like the Knicks have some real, like a guy like the Knicks could put OG Anunoby on Gafford and Lively and look to switch those types of actions. That could be something that they look to do. Out in the Western Conference, Oklahoma City, now that they have a little bit more interior size, now that they have Alex Caruso is another option. You can imagine a situation where they put Lou Dort even on Luka, but then put a bigger, stronger forward, or even even put Lou Dort on the center and put Caruso on Luka, and then they can switch ball screens. Like, I think there are going to be a lot of teams that try to mimic what Boston did, right? But even that's all specific playoff matchups for like the later rounds, right? Like over the course of the 82, they're going to dice everybody up. They just are. They have too much talent, and there's not enough teams in the league that have the personnel to give Dallas the issues that Boston gave them. Defense will be tricky. Klay fell off of a cliff defensively after winning the title in 2022. 2022 was like an underrated defensive moment of Klay's career. Like he kind of switched on to Jaylen Brown about halfway through the series and just did a really nice job on him. But since that series, he's kind of fallen off of a cliff. Kyrie will be their best guard defender in the starting lineup. In a lot of matchups, they're probably going to have to put PJ Washington on the other team's best perimeter player. I'm just curious to see how they deploy everyone. Like, are they going to ask Kyrie and Klay to guard guards so they can keep PJ as a low man? Or are they going to put PJ on the ball and ask Klay to spend more possessions and help? I'm really curious just to see how they deploy everyone. I don't think they can get to a top 10 defense with Klay in for Derrick Jones Jr. I don't think that that's an outcome that's on the table for them. But I do think they can get to 15 if everyone buys in. They have the rim protection. That's always a great foundation. They have size. They are just a little too slow on the perimeter to be a top 10 defense. But defense is going to be the main thing I'm watching with Dallas in the early part of the year to see how things shape up. In summary, I have Dallas as the best of the if things go right teams. I do think they're a little matchup dependent, and that's the main reason why I don't have them in the top tier. Teams that can that have two good forwards that can switch their 1-5 pick and roll, teams that can spread them out and attack their weaker defenders in space, right? On the defensive end, teams like when Luka's in help, he's fine. But as soon as there's a team that can really spread them out and can attack Luka off the dribble consistently, that's where things become a problem. I think it would be helpful if Luka got into a little bit better shape and got to the point where he could hedge and recover, because then he wouldn't have to necessarily worry about holding his own on an island if he could just throw a hedge and then sprint back to a shooter and chase him off the line. We'll see if that's something that they deploy more this year, because like they just went with like asking Luka to guard in the postseason, and that just didn't work. It went horribly well. So like that's something that I would like to see them explore a little bit more, is having Luka just see if he's capable of hedging. I'm not sure his feet are quick enough, but we'll see. But among all the teams in this 5 through 11 tier, like we talked about the Minnesota Timberwolves, we talked about the Lakers and the Suns and the Memphis Grizzlies and all these teams, the Philadelphia 76ers, all these teams that are in this tier. I think Luka's the best player in that tier considerably. Giannis is the one guy that you could take closer, but I don't think Milwaukee has the talent that Dallas has. So I think they're clearly the best of this particular tier of teams. I think Boston would kick their ass again if they played again. I don't think Klay solves the Boston problem, because like I told you guys, they're still just going to put Porzingis on PJ. So the upside, if you were going to be like, hey, Jason, explain to me how Dallas could beat Boston this year, it's PJ Washington gets better at above the break threes. It's PJ Washington gets better at above the break threes. Luka gets in better shape and becomes a better perimeter defender. Those two things happen. You give yourself a fighting chance against Boston. I think they'd get killed by Boston if they played them again, though. Let's say a team like Philly or Milwaukee gets through, though. Philly's going to have Kelly Oubre and Caleb Martin on the floor. Those are guys that Dallas could deploy Luka on and continue to pack the paint, keep him out of dribble drive situations, make iffy shooters make shots, kind of like they did with Minnesota. I think that Dallas has a chance. I think Dallas would beat Philly in a series. Milwaukee, another team where there's going to be guys on the floor where they feel comfortable helping off and sagging into the paint and packing the paint, not having to guard so much in space. Milwaukee's a team that I think Dallas would beat in a playoff series. So if Dallas can get out of the Western Conference, and if somebody can upset Boston, I think they have a real chance to win the title. And that, to me, puts them kind of classically in this tier of if things go right. I don't think they'll be a dominant regular season team. I think they'll be above the play-in, but most likely in that 3 to 6 range. So the last question is, why do I have Oklahoma City and Denver above them? Oklahoma City has considerably more talent. They're the most talented team in the Western Conference by far. That, to me, is a pretty straightforward explanation. Denver, talent-wise, is more on the same level as Dallas. Why do I have Denver over Dallas? Because Denver presents more matchup issues specifically for Boston. Boston does not have a soul who can remotely make Jokic feel uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Boston is like built to stop Dallas. They're built to slow down that offense. I think Boston is most likely going to win the East. So therefore, Denver is clearly a better candidate to get the trophy because they have more capability of beating Boston in a series than Dallas does. But if Boston gets upset, I think Dallas has a real shot. The roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Running it in from the 1 or an 80-yard bomb, we don't care how they score touchdowns, we want to bet on them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Super Bowl odds so far at this point in the season, the Chiefs at plus 500. Also, the Baltimore Ravens up to plus 750 as the second favorite to win the Super Bowl at this point. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. You know, whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. That's the reason the Toyota Camry has been America's best-selling sedan for the past 22 years. And the all-new Camry takes it to a new level. With a 4-mode drive switch, you're in total control of your ride. I mean, there are Hall of Fame point guards who don't have this level of control. And the Camry's got flash to match. We're talking available 19-inch multi-spoke alloy wheels and chrome dual-tipped exhaust. I mean, this is a seriously good-looking car. And the all-new Camry's got the comfort to go with the looks. Standard dual-tone automatic climate control will have you and your passengers right in their comfort zone. This is the complete package. There are no weaknesses in the Camry's game. You don't see that often on the court or on the road. And because every all-new Camry is a hybrid, it has difference-making fuel efficiency with up to an EPA estimated 51 miles per gallon combined. Whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. Learn more at toyota.com/Camry. All right, let's get into Magic-Pels. Also, real quick, before we get into this game, every time we get into the start of the year, I always have to kind of explain this to people. I cover a shit ton of games. I would say we go, on average, 5 times a week, and then maybe like a 6th episode for something that's usually a big NBA story that drops down or something along those lines, right? But in the 5 days a week, I'm on average covering 3 to 4 games. So we're covering somewhere between 15 and 20 games a week. Okay. I'm going to hit the big market teams. I'm going to hit the Knicks. I'm going to hit the Celtics. I'm going to hit the Sixers. I'm going to hit the Warriors. I'm going to hit the Lakers. I'm going to hit all, like, those are we just have to. That's just smart business. The way I compensate for that is I just work more and I make sure that I cover more games. So like we are still going to hit between 5 and 10 games a week that cover teams that are outside of like kind of like the major market teams. We are going to cover the Pelicans. We're going to cover the Magic as much as most of the other national NBA shows in the league. We just supplement it by doing more. So like, here's the thing. Not only are there big market teams that I want to hit, like the Lakers are my favorite team. You don't think I'm going to watch all the Laker games? Of course I'm going to come on here and share my thoughts. There's going to be, and because we market the show based on what gives us the best chance to work in search engines, like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of thumbnails that have LeBron James on it. There's going to be a lot of titles that say Lakers this, or Warriors that, or Knicks this, or Celtics that. But usually there's 4 to 5 segments in that show. And of those 4 to 5 segments, yeah, 2 or 3 of them are going to be hitting major market, big topics. But I'm always going to do the work to cover the rest of the league. So it's one of those things where one of the ways that we fight that, breakout clips, look for breakout clips, but 2, we put in chapter markers. So like, if you don't want to hear Lakers, if you're sick of hearing fucking Lakers, click on the video, fast forward past the Lakers part, and then you'll get to everything else. Again, I always just have to say this about once a year just to kind of remind people like, yeah, we're going to cover a lot of the mainstream stuff, but that doesn't mean we're not covering everything else. I work really hard to make sure that we get to a shit ton of games so that we can compensate for the fact that we hammer some of the mainstream stuff. And again, like as a basketball fan, yeah, when LeBron retires, I'm not going to have a team anymore. He's my one sentimental attachment in the NBA right now. And at that point, I won't have that specific, desire. But like, yeah, we're going to cover most of the Laker games. Why? Because I'm going to watch most of the Laker games because I'm a Laker fan and I'm going to have opinions about it. And I'm fortunate enough to have a situation where I can talk about them. So like, again, it's not, and quite frankly, the Lakers have a massive fan base. So that stuff makes us money. That stuff gives us like a means with which to pay the bills and to keep the lights on. Right. So like, again, I just have to say that about once a year. And on that note, let's talk about the Orlando Magic and the New Orleans Pelicans. So Zion looks amazing. He had 3 straight driving assists to start the game. The one that was on the first possession of the game was kind of like the classic Zion, where he comes up the right wing. He's got the ball in his left hand. He just kind of hits that high hesitation and just kind of dribbles a little bit towards the elbow. The entire Magic roster just like coalesces around the paint, throws a kick out pass to the wing. And I think it was Herb Jones, but I can't remember who it was. But one of the Pels role players knocks down a shot. And then next possession, similar thing. Next possession, similar thing. The Magic were doing a lot of switching, and so even when he would get different guys on switches, he's just trying to get downhill and make a kick-out pass. There was also a couple of plays in that first quarter stint, and both of these made my Timpf's tape segment, so you guys will see him here in a second. But Zion had these plays where he drove really hard to the right. I think one was over Wendell Carter Jr. and one was over Pat LeBoncaro, but a really hard dribble to the right, and he gets cut off. And then he spins back to the left and goes to a hook shot kind of in the middle of the floor and knocks it down. This is that like over the top shot that I say is so important for these downhill guys. This is the one that I've been begging Giannis to get forever. Even if you're the best athlete in the league at your position, you are inevitably going to run into somebody who is close to your level of athleticism and can stop you from just running roughshod over them all night long. Even the guy that is arguably the best athlete in NBA history, LeBron James, look at his career history. It's like he runs into Andre Iguodala. He runs into Kawhi Leonard. Even in recent years, he runs into Aaron Gordon. Now, mind you, he's not the athlete he was when he was younger, but like inevitably you run into a guy that can kind of sort of beat you to spots, chest you up, and force you to make something over the top. Doesn't mean you have to make a 3. If you can drive at that guy and then he cuts you off and you can counter back the other way and hit something over the top, that is something that you can rely on in a tight spot when the defense is guarding you one-on-one and not really helping off super far, and there's not a great look elsewhere, and that's kind of the best you can do on that possession. If you can get to a bucket where you could like, hey, I can hit this shot 50, 55% of the time, that's something that could really carry you in tight half-court situations. Back-to-back of them that looked really, really good. Jonathan Isaac checked in off the bench for the Magic. Zion immediately started bullying him underneath the basket. The Pelicans are even just barely scratching the surface of what this can become, because I didn't even see any really great drive and kick possessions where there were like multiple touches. I still think that's a thing that they can get to over time. Like this team is going to be so good on offense. If Zion can stay healthy, we could be looking at a truly special offensive season from him. And I think it's a top 10 offense and one that could get even higher with Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum. Those guys are such good spot up players. DeJounte Murray, we'll see. He didn't shoot the 3 ball well last night, but I think he's going to shoot it pretty well this year. Jordan Hawkins came in and shot the seams off the basketball. Like they just have all this shooting. And then they have these 2 guys in DeJounte and in Zion that can get downhill and can make plays. And even Brandon Ingram, as we've been hearing, has looked really good in training camp. And so that's another guy that can kind of break the defense down. DeJounte didn't shoot it well. He had a couple of his patent mid-range shots, but missed everything else. But he was getting to his spots and he was getting dribble penetration. And again, Orlando's defense is insanely good. So like this is a tough matchup for that like first version of this offense. At the end of the first half, they ran some 2-man game with DeJounte and Zion. And Zion was setting good screens and DeJounte was easily getting into the paint where he could make plays. I thought that was kind of an interesting action that we'll see more of this year. I think DeJounte's fit overall will take some reps just because it's kind of an interesting fit. But I do think it'll go fine. CJ looked great, shot the ball super well last year, came right back to work this year, 9 points on 6 jump shots yesterday. Jordan Hawkins, 18 points and 2 assists in 21 minutes, kind of slotted into like the Trey Murphy type of role. And what really impressed me about Jordan Hawkins was his ability to get dribble penetration off of his shooting ability. He was getting a lot of straight line drives off of dudes chasing him off the line. And he was able to, like, he made some drop-off passes, made some mid-range stuff. I thought it was a really nice game from Jordan Hawkins. You can see the formula for the Pelicans. Zion and DeJounte and Brandon getting dribble penetration, really high level shoot, drive, pass threats off the ball to capitalize on that attention. I think they're going to score a lot of points this year. Orlando. I love this team because I love a lot of the players on the team, but I hate watching them on offense. It always looks worse against teams like New Orleans too that do a lot of switching. By the way, they've got a lot of similar sized players. Orlando does. So a lot of teams do a lot of switching against them. But then they just run into this like kind of stagnant thing where they just bring the ball up the floor and they might have a guard come set a screen, but then it just inevitably turns into kind of like everyone standing around and watching Paolo or Franz trying to make something happen. It looks like pickup basketball. But there were some positives. They shot the ball well from the perimeter in the first half. They got cold in the second half, but in the first half, while the Pels starters were still playing, the Magic got 1.19 points per jump shot on 21 attempts. Paolo's shot looked good again. He was 3 for 5 on jumpers yesterday. Jonathan Isaac hit a 3. Jalen Suggs hit a bunch of threes. Again, they cooled off, but I thought that was encouraging after how poorly they shot the ball against Cleveland. And then their defense still looks insane. They have so much speed and strength in the guard core. Even off the bench, like Cole Anthony is like competing on the defensive end. Obviously, Anthony Black, his jump shot still looks a little sketch, but he obviously brings a lot defensively to the backcourt. And then they just have so much size and length in the front court. Like when Jonathan Isaac checked in, he started like ending up in a lot of help side possessions and protecting the rim. And like anyone on the Pelicans who wasn't Zion was like scared to shoot around the rim because of Jonathan Isaac. I'm so impressed by them on the defensive end. I'm so impressed by their physical profile. We just have to see more offensive growth out of them over the course of the season. All right, let's go to today's episode of Timpf's Tape. First couple of clips are going to be Zion left shoulder hook. So as I was talking about in the last segment, inevitably, even if you're a supreme athlete, you're going to run into a guy that can kind of sort of match up with you athletically. In this case, Paolo Banchero. Zion's going to make a really hard dribble move to the right, and Paolo, who's also an elite athlete, beats him to the spot, cuts him off. What do you do from there? This is where in situations where you need to create your own shot and you can't get to the rim, it's important to have some sort of counter to make something over the top. Zion's going to pivot over his right shoulder and take like a little 5-foot hook shot. That is a shot that Zion should be able to get to against every defender in the league at any time. If he can get to the point where he can knock that down 50% of the time, 55% of the time, that can become a huge weapon for him, especially in a playoff series when things grind down in the half court. Here's another example against Wendell Carter. Really good athlete at the center position. Zion's come in from the top of the key this time. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Get a switch. So Daniel Tice screens. There's a switch. Now we have Wendell Carter. Hard drive right. Wendell beats him to the spot, cuts him off. Zion pivots over his right shoulder, knocks down a hook. Again, that was over a center. That's a guy that's substantially taller than Zion. And he was able to get the shot off. Because again, anybody who actually cuts Zion off on his hard drive to the right is going to have to really, really dig down and take hard slide steps. He's not going to be able to quickly recover back going the opposite direction. But I thought that was really, really encouraging. And I'd like to see Zion take a bunch of those this year and hopefully hit it around 50%. This was a really impressive defensive possession from Cole Anthony. So we have the Magic loading up on the strong side against the Zion drive. Cole Anthony is sinking down into the lane to kind of make sure that Herb Jones doesn't cut to the basket. His man is actually CJ McCollum. Watch when the pass gets thrown, how quickly Cole Anthony recovers out to CJ. Sprints, boom, he's there on the catch. Completely glued up, gets a great contest, doesn't foul, forces a miss short, catches the ball in transition, goes the length of the floor, sees a little opportunity where he goes, hey, Jordan Hawkins, not a great athlete. Good athlete, but he's not very big and strong. I might be able to go through him. Sees the opportunity, drops that shoulder, gets the angle. Nice athletic finish at the rim. Cole Anthony is one of my favorite backup guards in the league, but like it's just an example too of defensive culture too. Good athlete, off the bench, comes in, brings the same level of defensive intensity as the starters. All right, 2 more. This was a fun one, a little action that the Pelicans ran for Zion that I really liked. It's kind of a setup out of a 5-out concept, all guys on the perimeter. CJ and DeJounte both just basically cross in front of Zion. And nothing ends up happening, but you do see some brief confusion out of Orlando. I do think they'll get some openings this year where as guys are crossing, people make a mistake. I talked to, again, action gives opportunity for the defense to make a mistake. Orlando's an elite defense. They don't make a mistake here, but you can kind of see the action, right? These guys cross. And notice how KCP threw a hedge too. You're going to see some situations where the hedge stays too long and DeJounte's able to drive that. But inevitably it ends up settling back into an ISO. But I do think we're going to see a lot more of that action. I'm curious to see how it settles down this year. Here's your textbook drive and kick, though. So we have Jalen Suggs with his body completely turned towards Zion, looking at the ball. That gives a closeout opportunity for CJ McCollum. Zion throws the ball. Jalen Suggs close out. That's that baked-in driving lane that I always talk to you guys about. If he's going to stand here and I get a pass on the wing, I have a guaranteed rip through to the right because Jalen Suggs is going to be closing out at me from my left-hand side. Rip, beats him off the dribble, okay? So now this is where we're at. Now we're going to talk a little bit about another element of spacing, off-ball screening. Daniel Theis was down here. DeJounte Murray was over here after the after that crossing action that CJ and DeJounte ran. Daniel Theis is going to set a back screen on Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Instead of digging down here and trying to box out for an offensive rebound, he sets this flare screen for DeJounte Murray, nails KCP, CJ McCollum makes the kickout pass, we get a wide open three. So again, Daniel Theis is in a situation like that. Wendell Carter's ignoring him and going towards the basket. He maintains himself as a threat on offense by being a screener off the ball. DeJounte misses the shot, but that's a really good look after an interesting little action. Then lastly, we're going to go to a different game, actually. This was a play from Oklahoma City, San Antonio. I didn't cover this game because there's too many players out for both teams. And just in preseason, there's so many games to cover. I want to make sure I hit ones where everyone's playing. But we get this really interesting, like double drag dribble handoff with Hartenstein as the hub. And I talked a lot about this in my Hartenstein signing reaction. But Hartenstein, I'm really fascinated with him operating as a passing fulcrum out here at the top of the key. But Kizon Wallace and Alex Crusoe are going to set a double wide pin down for Chet Holmgren. As Chet's going to come off, it's going to turn into a switch. But the main key here is as the switch occurs, Harrison Barnes is the guy that ends up having to grab Hartenstein, and then Sohan switches out onto Chet. As Sohan switches out aggressively, Chet beats him off the dribble. But look at Hartenstein. The interior seal on Harrison Barnes creates the angle for Chet to get to the basket and dunk. Again, watch Hartenstein right after the pass. He doesn't dilly-dally. He doesn't sit at the top of the key. I'm going to play this in full speed. Watch how quickly Hartenstein gets down from the DHO in here for the seal. See that? That's some really impressive two-man game from Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. We will definitely get a good breakdown of Oklahoma City in as soon as they get their starters out there. I'm really excited to see those guys. All right, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and supporting the show. We'll be back tomorrow with some more game breakdowns. I will see you guys then.